Good afternoon, Nokta TV viewers. Today we are hosting a very important guest with a vast background in Turkish-Armenian relations and normalization process. So I welcome Richard Giragosian, who is the founding director of the Regional Studies Center it's a think tank located in Yerevan. I should like to introduce a brief parts of his CV. It's very rich. If I start reading the whole of it, I think that would leave no time at all for our conversation. But Richard is also a very well-known figure in Turkey. He visits Turkey from time to time. I was with him in the near past, so I had the pleasure of meeting him in a think tank activity where we addressed the prospects of Turkey-Armenia normalization process, which is our main topic today. So Richard is the founding director of Regional Studies Center. But he's also a visiting professor at the College of Europe's Natolin campus, a senior expert at Yerevan State University's Center for European Studies, and then he served as a consultant, Asian Development Bank, the European Union delegation to Armenia, the International Crisis Group, the French Ministry of Defense. It goes on, and he also writes articles for the Turkish media outlets. And he's often quoted and cited by a very well-known international newspapers such as Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, International Herald Tribune, Le Figaro, The Economist. Again, I mean, a vast background, which makes him the perfect candidate to talk about Turkish-Armenian normalization process. So, Richard, I really appreciate your presence here today to talk about this important topic. And now we can start our conversation on this normalization process, which is of vital importance, both for Turkey and also for Armenia, but also for the region, of course. Let's start with, very briefly, on the main hurdles faced in the run-up to the 2009 protocols. What were the main impediments and why this process turned out to be a failure in terms of the normalization process between Turkey and Armenia?
Well, first, in a general context, when we look back at that previous round of engagement diplomatically between Armenia and Turkey, the protocol process failed for one main reason: the Azerbaijan factor. There was insufficient and absent progress regarding Nagorno-Karabakh in terms of Azerbaijan's belated opposition to normalization. And Turkey was put in a difficult position. Turkey, just as today, cannot do anything that goes against the interests of Azerbaijan. But looking back, there are lessons learned from that previous round of engagement. And another point of optimism is that the environment today is much different. Azerbaijan is much more willing to go along with normalization, given the post-war change in the regional landscape.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dear Richard. Despite the fact that there is an ongoing and increasing strategic competition between the United States, Russia, and China that dominates the global security landscape, there seems to have emerged a ray of hope in the horizon with regard to Turkey-Armenia normalization, which would also bring benefits to the region as a whole. So even under such a rivalry going on and the crises erupting one after the other, unfortunately, towards the end of last year, which still continues today in Ukraine, and which we are all following very closely as neighbors. I do admit that there is an entirely different episode in terms of Turkey-Armenia normalization in relations. So what are the prospects for taking this normalization process forward, and how could Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan contribute to it so that we will have a more stable and secure and prosperous region in the South Caucasus, at least in one of the strategic directions of Turkey?
That's a very good question. And in fact, the stars are realigning geopolitically. In other words, regarding the South Caucasus, post-war Nagorno-Karabakh, there is an accidental convergence of interests between Russia and the West. Post-war stability and the prevention of renewed hostilities as a shared objective between Moscow and Washington. It's the only area in the world today where there's an opening and an opportunity, where Russia is supportive of normalization between Armenia and Turkey. And if we look at the very first meeting of the special envoys that were appointed by Ankara and Yerevan, it is a significant demonstration that the first meeting was convened in Moscow, thereby making Russia more of a stakeholder in the positive process of normalization. Azerbaijan is also in no way sidelined. Turkey, unlike the past, is consulting Azerbaijan every step of the way, not after the fact, but during the process. And Armenia's key concession to Azerbaijan, providing road and rail links from Azerbaijan to its exclaves of Nakhichevan, are and were important preliminary demonstrations of progress, making the environment for Armenia-Turkey negotiations that much more productive and realistic. Finally, Armenia-Turkey normalization is not imposed by the U.S., and it's a process not designed to simply please the Europeans. It's a real indigenous, authentic effort of engagement between Armenia and Turkey as neighbors, without the necessity of external mediation.
And that indeed is a different ballgame, and it presents us a totally different configuration of actors, the regional actors being the main drivers in the seat to normalize these relations. So I think we are on the right track to further improve and take forward the normalization process between Turkey and Armenia. And it's also a turning point that both countries appointed special envoys who met on the 14th of January in Moscow. And I think they will continue their contacts during that period. Maybe in the next stage, either Armenia or Turkey would host such a meeting. I think that would also be very positive contribution to the process. And what, in your opinion, could the special envoys address during that process? It's a little bit maybe speculative in nature, but nevertheless, what would your recommendations be for them to adopt an agenda and to implement it?
Well, that's very important because we already see a degree of progress in the timing, the acceleration. In other words, after several months of positive statements by President Erdogan and Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia, there was in December a rather rapid, quick announcement and a sudden announcement of the appointment of specific diplomats empowered to negotiate. This is especially significant as a difference from the protocol process. In other words, this time, our second round of diplomatic negotiations or re-engagement will not require parliamentary ratification and will be conducted by just that, special envoys. The advantage for Turkey is to have a career diplomat with experience as the former Turkish ambassador to Washington. The Armenian advantage is no longer a degree of asymmetry, but a close confidant of Prime Minister Pashinyan. Mr. Ruben Rubinyan, Armenia's special envoy, has the ear of the Armenian Prime Minister, and we should expect much greater autonomy, flexibility in his negotiating portfolio. And we do expect coming meetings to happen very quickly. For example, Turkey is intent on hosting another round of the so-called 3+3 diplomatic meeting, and the Armenian foreign minister and special representative are most certainly going to attend the Antalya diplomatic forum in March. Fortunately, I as well have been invited by Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu and will be in attendance as well. In other words, this demonstrates the acceleration in engagement. And it's also important to note what this process is not about. This is not necessarily reconciliation. This is much more realistic and practical. It's normalizing relations with only two objectives: reopening the border and establishing diplomatic relations, making this much more practical for both sides, but also much more viable and predictable.
Thank you, Richard. And this time around, the impetus given by the leaders, particularly Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and also Russia, of course, to the process is also a key. And when I read the outcomes of the summit meetings, be it in Moscow or in Brussels, I have seen very positive remarks, promising remarks announced by the leaders, like President Aliyev, Prime Minister Pashinyan, which Turkey supported. And Turkey also made a series of statements regarding the Moscow meeting in December, followed by the summit meeting in Brussels. So these are encouraging developments. And this is supported by as you have underlined, by the regional setting. That's very important. And that makes us more hopeful for better atmospherics to carry this process forward. You mentioned about the 3+3, regional setting, regional format to further contribute to the process. It's like Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and then we have Iran, Georgia, and Russia. So apart from the trilateral context among Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, what could be the role of the rest of three, that's Iran, Georgia, and Russia, to that process?
Well, on the one hand, I'm not overly optimistic for the future of this 3+3 format, especially if we recognize problems between Georgia and Russia, as well as problems with Iran. Having said that, the reason we need to invest in this possible venue is like the Black Sea Economic Cooperation Organization. This diplomatic arena or format offers an opportunity for all to engage diplomatically. And the real benefit for all of us is a return to diplomacy over conflict and force of arms. So in this context, any and all diplomatic arenas and avenues for engagement should be welcomed and should be pursued. But at the end of the day, both Armenia-Turkey normalization and Armenia-Azerbaijan diplomacy depends on political will. This is also a key difference from football diplomacy in the protocol process. Armenia's government is a democratically elected government with a rare degree of legitimacy. It was re-elected after the war and now has the opportunity for statesmanship. And this is what we look to. You don't choose your neighbors, whether you like it or not, but this is a realistic readjustment to this region.
I do agree with you, Richard. The onus is primarily on the shoulders of Turkey, Armenia, and Azerbaijan to be reinforced by the support of Russia. So that's very important. And I think the leaders and all those involved will have this in their minds while taking this process forward. And I'm also very pleased to hear that your foreign minister, Special Envoy Rubinian, and you yourself will come to Antalya Diplomacy Forum. That's a good news. It's also emblematic of the atmospherics now covering this normalization process. And today in the Turkish newspaper, we have read the support of Prime Minister Pashinyan to their participation in Antalya Diplomacy Forum, which I hope will introduce further milestones in taking normalization process even further, a new impetus to be introduced into that process. Now, one of the important aspects of the Moscow meeting among President Putin, Prime Minister Pashinyan, and President Aliyev was there was a Moscow declaration that transpired after the meeting, and the part dedicated to opening all transport corridors. It said all transport corridors. This is very important because this was addressed at length in the past, but because of the difficulties involved, to which you have referred in your introductory remarks, we were not able to achieve a headway in opening up these transport corridors. Now, how do you see the chances of maybe it's an ambitious word, but a breakthrough in connectivity projects, including certainly Turkey, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and the rest of the regional countries? This is very important. And of course, since that was announced publicly, I think we should conceive of investing in both axes. That's the north-south axis, but also the east-west axis. So how do you see the chances of attaining such a rather ambitious, but nevertheless realistic goal in opening up all these corridors and connecting all the regional countries together in a cooperative scheme?
Well, first, in the post-war region, the objective of reopening closed borders, establishing trade and transport routes, this is not necessarily an automatic victory because in many ways it's the basic minimum of relations between neighbors. In other words, what we have today is the aberration. It is, in former Foreign Minister Davutoglu's words, normalization was seeking to normalize the abnormal. It is abnormal or unusual to have closed borders and trade embargoes. So I think it's the first step forward in the regional reintegration of trade and transport. Most interestingly, the driver, the incentive and impetus will be from Armenia-Turkey. And the reason I say that is Armenia-Turkey for years has engaged in bilateral trade through Georgia. Now it's much cheaper. In reopening the border, in increasing bilateral trade, the reestablishment of air links, etc. Whereas Armenia-Azerbaijan, which is much more problematic, can then be helped and assisted with the positive example from the development of Armenian-Turkish trade relations. But at the same time, this is the basic minimum. This is the starting point for true connectivity in terms of using the leverage from the positive synergy between Armenia and Turkey to also help other areas of conflict. And in this regard, I think Turkey's role is significant because Russia has excluded Turkey from the trilateral working group on regional trade and transport. And this is an important way for Turkey to regain a role in regional economics. And finally, the timing is key. We all share a challenge of economic recovery from COVID-19. With new supply chains necessary and economic recovery, we can share the burden of this challenge together.
Yeah. Of course, when you look at the discussions in Turkey, people seem to focus on the Zengezur corridor, like passing through Nakhchivan and then Armenia and then Azerbaijan. But in my humble opinion, one corridor is not enough. And in the Moscow Declaration, it talks about all corridors. So I think we should add to Zengezur corridor and have alternative routes as well. I'm talking about railroads and highways and what have you. Not to mention the seaports, the connectivity between seaports and airports. That is also very important. And I think the air connectivity has started or will start very soon between Turkey and
yes.
Yerevan.
Let me add, if I may. If I may, because you raise a good point. In terms of the current round of negotiations between Armenia and Turkey, there is much more attention and focus on secondary opportunities. In particular, reopening border crossing points between Armenia and Turkey, in contrast to only Azerbaijan-Nakhchivan. Second, Russia owns the railway network of Armenia. Fortunately, this could become an advantage in restoring the Gumri-Kars railway link. And just as during the protocol process, we did have discussions over Black Sea port access, both Trabzon as well as the port of Rize, President Erdogan's hometown. This is a way to perhaps share a victory from diplomacy after a devastating military defeat and transforming the region into more of an economic example of recovery and interdependence, which is crucial to deter future conflict.
Exactly. And what makes this process differ from the process which failed in the past is that there is a regional impetus behind it. Because last time around, when we were talking about connectivity, particularly the railroad connection and highway connection, particularly the railroad, Switzerland was involved. But this time around, I think we as the regional countries can do it by cooperating among ourselves. So we don't need any other outside actor to achieve this objective. And this is what is important, this regional momentum gaining ground now due to that ongoing normalization process. This is very important. There is another important aspect I think we should reflect upon. I'm sure you would recall the decisions taken by the G7 leaders in June 2021 to invest in infrastructure, particularly infrastructure, health, education, and what have you, other sectors. Certainly communications. And then this was followed by a very ambitious project, or initiative rather, adopted by the EU in December 2021. That's the EU Gateway. Now what we are talking about is 300 billion euros to be earmarked for investing or incentivizing investment in infrastructure projects. So when you read about these decisions and the initiative launched by the EU, there could also be prospects of dovetailing our regional cooperative scheme in terms of connectivity with those financial resources, which would kind of expand the economies of scale, both on a regional level as well as a kind of maybe a broader level, and which also would lead to convergence of interests starting from the region and reaching beyond the region, extending to Europe, extending to Asia. Could you please elaborate how these, decisions, G7 decisions, the EU initiative, and our regional, ownership of a cooperative scheme, how they could be aligned to further increase the economies of scale that I think would be achieved if managed in a wise manner?
I agree with you, because what we also see is a recognition for the first time ever that economics and trade are now seen and recognized as true incentives for all sides. Having said that, what we also see is a unique opportunity for the European Union. This is a validation of their concept of connectivity. And for Russia, the European Union's engagement in infrastructure, in connectivity, is not a threat to Russian interests. In fact, just the opposite. It legitimizes Russia's post-war position. And for both Turkey and Armenia, it's especially well-timed. For Turkey, in the face of an economic crisis, it's an important search for new markets. And for both Armenia and Turkey, there's a sub-regional opportunity where Yerevan is the largest urban center east of Gaziantep, of Aintab. In other words, this is about economic development and stabilizing the east of Turkey, where in the regional development of Turkey, this is not the national economy only, but also regional development between Armenia and eastern Turkey. And this also gives local benefits to commerce, trade, and economic stability on both sides of the border.
Thank you, Richard. I really appreciate that you have spared your time to talk about Turkey-Armenia normalization process. I hope we will have brighter episodes coming ahead. It is a good opportunity for the Turkish and Armenian authorities to meet each other at Antalya and discuss further prospects of potential cooperation, which would introduce a regional peace and stability and security to the benefit of peoples living in the region. There is this time a big opportunity, and it should not be missed, in my personal view. And I believe, depending on the recent initiatives and contacts achieved, it's highly likely that we will have better chapters during that normalization process. And it could also be a sigh of relief, at least in one particular area in our neighborhood. That's the South Caucasus as a whole. And thank you once again for participating in this interview. And whenever you come to Turkey, please spare some of your time to have further interviews here or elsewhere, but it's important that you continue to share your views as a person who knows Turkey very well with the Turkish audience. Once again, let me express my gratitude to you for this very important conversation, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.